Thank you, Nico. Hello. Let's start with two very simple questions. By a show of hands, raise your hand if you have ever been in an electric car. Okay. And raise your hand if you support harnessing wind power. That's most of you. It was a trick question to set you up for what's coming next. Sure you have seen these headlines in the news recently. But what has also been in the news, but perhaps less visible, has been the mining of rare earth minerals in Myanmar. These minerals used in everything from wind turbines to smartphones and electric cars to high-tech military technologies have come to represent not only an environmental and humanitarian crisis, but also a global geopolitical fault line. It shows how the race for clean energy is quietly deepening instability and an ecological crisis across Southeast Asia. When I first read about the mining, it seemed like another new but unfortunate addition to the list of illicit trade from Myanmar, like timber, tin, jade, and drugs. But here's the first paradox. The problem really started decades ago when mining was first outsourced to China because it was cheaper and came with little environmental constraints. Foreign buyers for decades thrived on a structural dependency that has now become both economically and geopolitically risky. The world benefited from artificially low prices to build high-tech military technologies and now green industries on very unstable foundations. But when Beijing began clearing up its own highly polluting mining sector over the last couple of decades, extraction moved quietly south into the border in Myanmar. And the scale of this, Myanmar now supplies more than half of China's heavy rare earth imports, particularly dysprosium and terbium, used for critical magnets in electric cars and wind turbines. The mining method used in Myanmar is called in situ leaching, a process which is as cheap as it is destructive. While the mixed rare earth sediments are sent to China for processing, the waste that remains is a cocktail of acids and heavy metals that seeps into the groundwater and is dumped into the rivers with almost no treatment. The results are devastating. Deforestation is rapid across the region. And the tributaries of the Mekong River, like Kok, Sai, and Ruok rivers, which flow close to northern Thailand and Laos, are now contaminated with arsenic and other heavy metals. They flow to communities close to Thailand, northern Thailand, that are heavily dependent on these rivers for survival. Thai communities already report skin diseases, respiratory issues, and growing fears about food contamination, including deformed fishes found in these rivers. Farmers worry that their rice fields are absorbing toxins through irrigation water. And this is not just a local problem, it's transboundary pollution. These same rivers feed the entire Mekong system, which support nearly 65 million people across Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. And if the contamination continues, the ecological and health consequences could last for generations. And that's the second paradox. While the world celebrates this progress towards decarbonization, the people living along the Mekong River are paying the real price. But Myanmar's rare earth story is not just environmental, it's political and deeply geopolitical. The mines are concentrated in Kachin and Shan states, areas close to China, Thailand, and Laos, long caught between the military and the different ethnic armed groups. Control over these mines now funds all sides of Myanmar's civil war. Meanwhile, Chinese state-linked enterprises provide financing, equipment, and logistical support to ensure that all the extracted minerals still end up in China for processing. So this web of armed groups, state enterprises, and illicit network reflects a broader reordering of Myanmar's conflict economy after the 2021 coup. Resource control remains central to the agendas of all sides, and while it does give Myanmar a global strategic leverage, it risks undermining the crisis to a more transactional resource issue and reduces long-term stability, fueling deeper geopolitical tensions. So far, other countries like India, China, and the US have thought of direct engagement with different armed groups to counter the sourcing issue of rare earths. But sourcing and supply chain weaponization is only a problem if the country does not have a good relationship with China. The conflict economy and the ecological disaster still remains a problem. So ending mining, at least in the short term, is probably unrealistic. But continuing on this path is also unsustainable. A more responsible approach must include several steps, including targeted diplomacy and more regional cooperation between Thailand, Myanmar, China, including either bilaterally or including using regional forums like the Mekong River Commission and ASEAN to address the transboundary pollution. International buyers need to engage in supply chain due diligence to trace the origin of their rare earth materials and commit to a do no harm sourcing. Local engagement, including direct dialogue with the armed groups in Myanmar, with civil society groups and affected communities in Thailand to improve environmental safeguards, monitoring, and ensure community health. Lastly, there's a need to better regulate the mining industry in Myanmar, share best practices with other countries that also engage in this extraction, and ensure that the waste is at least properly disposed. And no, these steps would not end Myanmar's conflict economy and the disaster overnight, but they could help reduce harm, improve accountability, and protect millions downstream. So neither are Myanmar's rare earths literally rare, nor are they a peripheral issue. And it is in all our interest to ensure that these raw materials that quite literally drive our lives today are sustainably sourced. On one end, the web of armed groups are dependent on rare earth mining, as is China, which risks losing its global negotiating leverage if the supply falls. On the other end, rare earths are at the center of our global geopolitical, technological, and energy future, and at the heart of South Asia's most urgent ecological and geopolitical crisis. If the global green transition is to be truly sustainable, it must reckon with where its raw materials come from, who controls them, and who suffers in their extraction. Because every smartphone, every electric car, and every wind turbine ultimately now carries a trace of Myanmar's mountains. And the cost of ignoring this reality will be measured not just in carbons, but in rivers poisoned and human lives destroyed. Thank you.